The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows over the quiet town of Willow Creek. Nestled between rolling hills and vast stretches of prairie, the town was a place where time seemed to move slower than the rest of the world. Life here was simple, predictable, and often uneventful. Most people liked it that way, except maybe Emma Taylor. Emma was a woman in her early 30s with sharp green eyes and auburn hair tied back in a loose ponytail. She worked tirelessly running the local diner, a cozy little spot called Willow's Kitchen. It wasn't fancy, but it had charm. The walls were lined with faded photographs of the town's history, and the smell of freshly brewed coffee always filled the air. For years, Emma had poured her heart into keeping the diner alive, even when business slowed down or life got tough. But lately, she'd been feeling restless, like something or someone was missing from her day's dot. It was one of those dusty afternoons when everything changed. Emma stood behind the counter, wiping down tables after the lunch rush. The diner was empty except for an elderly man sipping tea by the window and two kids sharing a plate of fries at a corner booth. Outside, the wind kicked up dirt along Main Street, making swirls of brown clouds dance across the road. Just as Emma turned to stack chairs, the faint sound of hoofbeats caught her attention. Peering through the glass door, she saw a figure riding into town on horseback. He moved slowly, his silhouette framed against the golden light of the setting sun. The rider wore a wide-brimmed hat that shaded most of his face, but Emma could tell he was tall and lean, with broad shoulders and a confident posture. His clothes were practical: a worn leather jacket, faded jeans, and scuffed boots, but there was something about him that didn't quite fit the image of a typical cowboy. Curiosity piqued, Emma watched as the stranger dismounted in front of the general store across the street. He tied his horse to the hitching post and adjusted his hat before stepping inside. Moments later, he emerged carrying a small bag of supplies. Then, without hesitation, he crossed the street and entered the diner. The bell above the door jingled softly as he stepped inside. Emma straightened up, forcing a polite smile onto her face. "Afternoon," she greeted him warmly. "What can I get you?" The man glanced around the room, taking in the photographs and the cozy atmosphere. When his gaze finally landed on Emma, she noticed his eyes, dark, piercing, and full of secrets. "Coffee," he said simply, his voice deep and gravelly, like he hadn't spoken much recently. "Black." "Sure thing," Emma replied, grabbing a mug from the shelf. As she poured the coffee, she couldn't help but steal another glance at him. Up close, she could see the lines etched into his weathered face, the kind that came from years of living outdoors. There was a ruggedness to him, but also a quiet sadness that lingered beneath the surface. He took the mug from her and nodded slightly in thanks. Instead of sitting at the counter, he chose a booth in the far corner, away from the other customers. Emma frowned slightly as she watched him settle in. Something about him felt different. Not dangerous, exactly, but not entirely ordinary either. Over the next hour, more townsfolk trickled into the diner, filling the space with chatter and laughter. Emma stayed busy refilling drinks and serving plates of pie, but her mind kept drifting back to the stranger in the corner. Every now and then, she'd catch him watching her, though he quickly looked away whenever their eyes met. It was maddening, really. Who was this man? And why did he seem so out of place in such a small, sleepy town? By the time evening rolled around, the diner had emptied out again. Emma began tidying up, stacking dishes, and sweeping the floor. When she passed the corner booth, she noticed the stranger still sitting there, nursing what must have been his fourth cup of coffee. Feeling bold, she stopped and leaned against the table. "You know," she said casually, "most folks don't stick around this long unless they're planning to stay a while." He raised an eyebrow, amused by her comment. "Is that so?" he asked, his tone light but guarded. "It is," Emma confirmed with a playful smirk. "So, what's your story? You passing through, or are you here to cause trouble?" A ghost of a smile crossed his lips. "Neither, I reckon. Just needed a break from the road." "Well, Willow Creek isn't exactly known for its excitement," Emma joked. "But we do have good coffee and decent company, if you're interested." For a moment, he studied her, as if weighing whether or not to trust her. Finally, he extended a hand. "Jack Harper," he said. "Nice to meet you." "Emma Taylor," she replied, shaking his hand firmly. His grip was strong, calloused from years of hard work. "Welcome to Willow Creek, Jack." They talked for a while, though Jack remained tight-lipped about his past. He mentioned traveling across the country, working odd jobs here and there, and enjoying the freedom of the open road. Emma listened intently, intrigued by his stories, yet sensing there was more he wasn't saying. Still, she didn't press him. Some people needed time to open up, and she respected that dot as the night wore on. Jack eventually paid his tab and prepared to leave. Before stepping outside, he paused and looked back at Emma. "Thanks for the coffee and the conversation," he said sincerely. "I might stop by again tomorrow." Emma smiled, surprised by how much she hoped he would. "Anytime, Jack. Safe travels." With that, he tipped his hat and disappeared into the twilight, leaving Emma to wonder if she'd ever see him again. Little did she know, Jack Harper was about to turn her world upside down and reveal secrets that would change both their lives forever. The next morning, Emma woke up early, just as the first rays of sunlight began to peek over the horizon. She had always been an early riser, finding comfort in the quiet moments before the town came alive. But today, her thoughts were distracted. Jack Harper's face kept appearing in her mind, his dark eyes, his weathered hands, and the way he carried himself with a mix of confidence and mystery. She tried to shake it off, reminding herself that he was probably just another traveler, passing through. Still, she couldn't deny the spark of curiosity he'd ignited in her dot by the time she reached the diner. The air was already warm, promising another sunny day. As she unlocked the door and flipped the closed sign to open, she noticed something unusual on one of the tables, a small paperback book titled The Old Man in the Sea. It wasn't hers. She didn't keep books in the diner. Picking it up, she flipped through its pages and found a note tucked inside. Written in neat handwriting were the words, "Thought you might like this. Jack." Emma felt a smile tug at her lips. So, he had come back, and not only that, he'd left her a gift. She placed the book on the counter and glanced out the window, half expecting to see him riding into town again. But the street was empty, save for a few stray dogs chasing each other. Near the post office dot over the next few days, Jack became a regular at the diner. He arrived around the same time every afternoon, always ordering black coffee and taking his usual spot in the corner booth. At first, their conversations were brief and casual, limited to small talk about the weather or the latest gossip in Willow Creek. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, they began to open up to each other. One afternoon, after serving him his coffee, Emma slid a new book onto his table, a Western novel she thought he might enjoy. "I figured you could use something new to read," she said with a shrug, "unless you're tired of my recommendations." Jack chuckled softly, picking up the book. "Not at all. I appreciate it." He paused, studying the cover for a moment before adding, "You've got good taste." "Well, don't let it go to your head," Emma teased, though she couldn't hide the faint blush creeping into her cheeks. "I'm just trying to keep you entertained while you waste away in that booth all day." "I wouldn't call it wasting." "Away," Jack replied, his tone thoughtful. "Sometimes sitting still is exactly what a person needs." Emma tilted her head, intrigued. "What do you mean?" He hesitated, as if weighing his words carefully. "Let's just say I've spent a lot of years moving from place to place. never sticking around long enough to put down roots. It can be exhausting. Emma nodded slowly, sensing there was more to his story than he was letting on. Sounds lonely, she said gently. It is, Jack admitted after a long pause. But sometimes loneliness feels safer than staying put. His honesty caught her off guard. She hadn't expected him to share so much, especially not with someone he barely knew. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence between them wasn't awkward, though it was comfortable, like they were both content to simply exist in each other's presence. As the days turned into weeks, their bond grew stronger. Jack continued to visit the diner, and Emma made it a habit to leave books for him on his table. Each one sparked a new conversation, revealing bits and pieces of who he was. He told her about his love for wide-open spaces, his fascination with stars on clear nights, and his knack for fixing things with his hands. In return, Emma shared stories about her life in Willow Creek, her dreams of opening a bakery someday, her struggles with running the diner alone, and her memories of growing up in such a tight-knit community. Despite their growing connection. However, Jack remained guarded about certain parts of his past. Whenever Emma asked about his family or where he came from, he deflected the question with a joke or changed the subject entirely. It frustrated her at times, but she understood that everyone had their secrets. If Jack wanted to share, he would in his own time. One evening, after closing the diner, Emma decided to take a walk to clear her head. The air was cool and crisp, carrying the scent of wildflowers blooming along the edge of town. As she strolled down Main Street, she spotted Jack sitting on a bench near the park. His hat was pulled low over his face, and he seemed lost in thought. "Hey, stranger," she called out, approaching him cautiously. "Mind if I join you?" Jack looked up, startled for a moment, then smiled faintly. "Not at all." She sat beside him, folding her hands in her lap. They sat in silence for a while, watching the stars twinkle above the horizon. Finally, Emma broke the quiet. "You know, you never really talk about your family, or where you're from." Jack stiffened slightly, his jaw tightening. "That's because there's not much to tell." "Come on," Emma pressed gently. "Everyone has a story, even cowboys." He sighed, leaning back against the bench. "All right, fair enough. I grew up in Texas, on a big ranch. My dad was a rancher, my mom a schoolteacher. We weren't rich, but we had everything we needed, or so I thought." Emma listened intently, sensing that he was finally ready to open up. "What happened?" "My parents died when I was young," Jack continued, his voice softer now. "After that, I bounced around foster homes until I turned 18. By then, I'd learned how to fend for myself. So I hit the road, figuring I didn't need anyone else anyway." "That must have been hard," Emma murmured, her heart aching for him. "It was," Jack admitted, "but it taught me how to survive. How to keep moving forward, no matter what." "And is that why you travel so much?" she asked. "Because you don't want to stop moving?" He nodded slowly. "Something like that. Some people can't stay rooted, not without losing themselves." Emma considered his words, feeling a pang of sadness for the boy he once was and the man he had become. "You know, Jack," she said softly, "there's nothing wrong with wanting to belong somewhere, with letting yourself care about people." Jack didn't respond right away. Instead, he stared up at the sky, his expression unreadable. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "Maybe, but some wounds run too deep to heal." They sat together for a while longer, the weight of his confession hanging in the air between them. Though Emma didn't fully understand the pain he carried, she resolved to be patient. Whatever demons haunted Jack, she hoped he would find peace in Willow Creek, even if only for a little while. As they parted ways that night, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that Jack was more than just a wandering cowboy. There was something about him, a quiet strength, a hidden depth that hinted at a life far removed from the dusty trails he claimed to call home. And as much as she wanted to uncover the truth, she also knew that some mysteries were meant to unfold in their own time. For now, she was content to let him stay a stranger who had somehow started to feel like a friend. The days rolled on, and Jack became a familiar face in Willow Creek. He wasn't just a regular at the diner anymore. He started showing up at other places around town, too. The general store, the post office, even the small park where kids played. After school, the townsfolk began to warm up to him, drawn to his quiet charm and easygoing nature. But despite his growing presence, there was still an air of mystery about him that no one could quite put their finger on. Emma noticed it most of all. She had grown closer to Jack over the past few weeks, sharing more conversations and moments than she ever expected. Yet, there were times when she felt like she was looking at two different people. One was the kind, thoughtful man who read books, laughed at her jokes, and helped her carry supplies into the diner. The other was someone harder to pin down, someone with secrets buried deep beneath his calm exterior. One afternoon, as Emma wiped down tables during the lunch rush, a commotion outside caught her attention. Through the window, she saw a sleek black car pull into the parking lot. It was out of place in Willow Creek, where most folks drove pickups or old sedans. Two men dressed in sharp suits stepped out, adjusting their ties as they glanced around the quiet town. They looked completely out of place, like businessmen lost in a world they didn't belong to. Curious, Emma stepped outside to see what was going on. Before she could say anything, one of the men approached her. "Excuse me, Mom," he said in a clipped tone. "We're looking for a Mr. Jack Harper. Have you seen him?" Emma's heart skipped a beat. "Jack? Why are you looking?" "For him?" The man hesitated, glancing at his companion before answering. "It's regarding some legal matters. We've been trying to locate him for some time." "Legal matters?" Emma frowned, unsure what to make of it. "He's around here somewhere," she said cautiously. "But I don't think he'll appreciate being bothered." The men exchanged a glance, then nodded politely. "Thank you, Mom. If you see him, please let him know we're here." As they walked away, Emma felt a knot form in her stomach. Something about the situation didn't sit right with her. She hurried back inside the diner, where Jack was sitting in his usual booth, sipping coffee. "Jack," she said, sliding into the seat across from him, "there are some men outside asking for you." Jack froze, his mug halfway to his lips. For a moment, he didn't move, his expression unreadable. Then, with a deep sigh, he set the mug down and leaned back against the booth. "Did they say what they wanted?" "Something about legal matters," Emma replied, studying his face closely. "What's going on, Jack?" He ran a hand over his jaw, clearly weighing his options. Finally, he nodded toward the door. "Let's go talk to them." Emma followed him outside, her mind racing with questions. The two men spotted Jack immediately and strode over, their polished shoes crunching on the gravel. "Mr. Harper," one of them said, extending a hand, "we've been looking for you." "I can see that," Jack replied, shaking the man's hand briefly. His tone was polite but guarded. "What do you want?" "We represent your family's estate," the second man explained, pulling out a folder. "There are some documents that require your signature, matters related to the land holdings in this area." Emma's eyes widened. Land holdings? What were they talking about? She turned to Jack, expecting him to deny it or brush them off. Instead, he stood there silently, his jaw tightening. "Is this true?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Do you own land here?" Jack hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. "Yes, a lot of it." The revelation hit Emma like a punch to the gut. All this time, she'd thought he was just a wandering cowboy, a drifter passing through. But now, standing in front of her, was a man who owned vast stretches of land surrounding Willow Creek. How had she missed it? More importantly, why hadn't he told her? "I need to explain," Jack said quietly, turning to the men. "Give me a minute." Without waiting for a response, he grabbed Emma's arm gently and led her back inside the diner. They sat down in the corner booth, and Jack took a deep breath before speaking. "I didn't lie to you, Emma. I just didn't tell you everything." "That's an understatement," she muttered, crossing her arms. "Start talking." Jack leaned forward, his elbows resting on the table. "My family owned thousands of acres of land across this state. When my parents passed away, the property went to me. I never cared about it. I didn't want any part of that life, so I left. I gave up control of the business, hired managers to handle things, and disappeared. I wanted nothing to do with money or power or responsibility. But those men out there—" Emma trailed off, piecing it together. "They're here because something changed?" Jack nodded grimly. "There's a dispute over the land. Some developers want to buy it, turn it into shopping malls, housing complexes, that kind of thing. The board needs my approval to sell, but I haven't been involved in years. Now they're forcing the issue." Emma stared at him, struggling to process everything. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "Because I didn't think it mattered," Jack exclaimed, frustration creeping into his voice. "I came here to escape all of that, to find peace. I didn't want anyone treating me differently because of who I am or what I own." Emma softened slightly, seeing the conflict in his eyes. "Okay," she said slowly. "So, what happens now?" "I have to deal with it," Jack admitted, "which means sticking around longer than I planned." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Outside, the two men waited patiently, occasionally glancing toward the diner. Inside, the tension between Jack and Emma hung heavy in the air. Finally, Emma broke the silence. "You should have told me, Jack. Not because I care about your money or your land, but because honesty matters. You can't keep shutting people out." He looked down at the table, guilt etched into his features. "You're right. I'm sorry." Emma sighed, feeling torn between anger and understanding. "Look, I get it. You've been hurt before. You're trying to protect yourself. But running away doesn't fix anything. Sometimes facing the truth is the only way to move forward." Jack nodded slowly, absorbing her words. "You're probably right. And I'll try, starting now." With that, he stood up and squared his shoulders. "Let's go talk to them." Together, they walked back outside, where the men greeted Jack with relieved smiles. Over the next hour, they discussed the legal issues surrounding the land, explaining the pressure from developers and the potential impact on Willow Creek. Jack listened intently, asking questions and taking notes. By the end of the meeting, he seemed more determined than ever to take charge of the situation. As the men drove away, leaving Jack and Emma alone in the parking lot, she turned to him with a raised eyebrow. "So, what's the plan?" "I'm staying," Jack said firmly. "Not just to handle the paperwork, but to figure out what I really want. Maybe it's time I stopped running." Emma smiled faintly, feeling a flicker of hope. "Good, because Willow Creek could use someone like you." Jack chuckled softly, though his expression remained serious. "Just don't expect me to start wearing suits anytime soon." "Deal," Emma replied, laughing despite herself. "But fair warning, if you're sticking around, you're helping me repaint the diner next week." Jack grinned, the first genuine smile she'd seen in days. "Now that's a challenge I can handle." As they headed back inside, Emma couldn't help but feel a sense of relief. The truth was out, and while it didn't solve everything, it was a start. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she knew one thing for certain. Jack Harper wasn't just a wandering cowboy anymore, and neither was she. The days that followed Jack's decision to stay in Willow Creek were anything but calm. News of his identity spread quickly through the small town, like wildfire racing across dry grass. At first, people were skeptical. How could someone who looked like a drifter own so much land? But once the truth sank in, reactions varied. Some folks were excited, seeing Jack as a potential savior for their struggling community. Others were wary, fearing that his wealth and influence might disrupt the simple way of life they cherished. Emma found herself caught in the middle of it all. On one hand, she was proud of Jack for stepping up and taking responsibility. On the other, she worried about how the attention would affect him and their budding friendship. She noticed subtle changes in his demeanor. He seemed more guarded, as if bracing himself for judgment or conflict. At the same time, he threw himself into work, meeting with lawyers, reviewing documents, and touring the properties he owned. It was clear he was determined to make things right, but Emma couldn't shake the feeling that he was carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. One morning, as Emma flipped pancakes on the griddle at the diner, Jack walked in looking unusually tense. His hat was pulled low over his face, and there was a faint shadow of stubble on his jaw, suggesting he hadn't shaved in a couple of days. "Morning," he muttered, sliding into his usual booth without making eye contact. "Rough night?" Emma asked, setting a cup of coffee in front of him. "You could say that," Jack replied, rubbing his temples. "I got another call from the developers last night. They're pushing hard for me to sell." Emma frowned, leaning against the table. "What do you want to do?" "I don't know," Jack admitted, his voice heavy with frustration. "On paper, selling makes sense. The money could help the town build schools, fix roads, bring in jobs. But it doesn't feel right. These people deserve better than strip malls and cookie-cutter houses." Emma nodded thoughtfully. "So, what's stopping you from saying no?" Jack hesitated, staring into his coffee as if searching for answers. "Pressure. Expectations. My family built this empire, and now everyone wants a piece of it, including me, apparently. I don't know how to balance doing what's best for Willow Creek with staying true to myself." Emma reached out and placed a hand on his arm. "You don't have to figure it all out at once. Take your time. Do what feels right, not what others expect." Her words lingered in the air, offering comfort but also raising questions neither of them had answers to. For now, Jack simply nodded, grateful for her support. Later that week, tensions in Willow Creek reached a boiling point. A group of developers arrived in town, armed with glossy brochures and promises of prosperity. They held a meeting at the community center, inviting residents to hear their plans for transforming the area. Jack attended reluctantly, sitting near the back with Emma by his side. As the developers spoke, painting vivid pictures of shopping centers, highways, and luxury housing developments, murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some townsfolk clapped enthusiastically, eager for change. Others scowled, shaking their heads in disapproval. When the floor opened for questions, an older farmer named Joe stood up, his voice gruff with emotion. "What happens to us, the ones who've lived here our whole lives? You talk about progress, but what about the families who depend on this land to survive?" The lead developer smiled smoothly, clearly prepared for such concerns. "We'll offer fair compensation to anyone affected, and we'll create new opportunities, jobs, businesses, growth. Progress benefits everyone." "Not always," Jack interjected, standing up. The room fell silent as all eyes turned to him. Progress can destroy just as easily as it builds. If we pave over these fields and tear down these homes, we lose the heart of Willow Creek. Is that really worth it? The developers exchanged uneasy glances, unprepared for resistance from the very person they needed approval from. One of them stepped forward, attempting to reason with Jack. "Mr. Harper, we understand your concerns. But think about the bigger picture. This project could put Willow Creek on the map, bring in revenue, tourism, investment." "I'm not interested in turning this town into something it's not," Jack shot back, his voice firm. "Willow Creek has value beyond dollar signs. Its beauty, its history, its people, they matter more than any skyscraper or mall." The room erupted into applause, with many residents nodding in agreement. Even Emma felt a surge of pride watching Jack stand up for what he believed in. Still, she knew the battle was far from over. The developers wouldn't give up easily, and neither would those in town who saw opportunity in the proposed changes. After the meeting, Jack and Emma walked back to the diner in silence. The weight of the evening hung between them, heavy and unresolved. Finally, Emma broke the quiet. "That took guts, Jack, standing up to them like that." "It wasn't easy," Jack admitted, "but I meant every word. This place, it's special. I can see why you love it so much." Emma smiled faintly, touched by his sincerity. "Do you think you made a difference tonight?" "I hope so," Jack said, though doubt lingered in his tone. "But there's still a long road ahead. People are divided, and the developers won't back down without a fight." "Well, you're not alone," Emma reminded him. "This is my home, too. Whatever happens next, I've got your back." Her words brought a small measure of comfort to Jack, though he couldn't ignore the growing complexity of his situation. He had come to Willow Creek seeking peace, only to find himself at the center of a storm. Yet, amidst the chaos, he realized something important. He cared deeply about this town and the people in it. For the first time in years, he felt a sense of purpose, even if it came with challenges. Over the next few days, Jack threw himself into finding solutions. He met with local farmers, business owners, and residents, listening to their concerns and ideas. He hired environmental consultants to assess the impact of development on the area's natural resources. Slowly but surely, he began drafting a Plan 1 that balanced progress with preservation, ensuring Willow Creek's future while honoring its past. Meanwhile, Emma continued to support him in her own way. She organized meetings at the diner, bringing together key members of the community to discuss strategies and share perspectives. She also kept Jack grounded, reminding him to take breaks and recharge when the stress became overwhelming. Despite the mounting pressure, Jack started to feel a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, he could protect the town he'd come to love and find a place where he truly belonged. But as he lay awake at night, staring at the ceiling of his rented cabin, he couldn't ignore the nagging question in the back of his mind. Was he doing this for Willow Creek or for himself? Emma noticed the toll it was taking on him. One evening, after closing the diner, she joined him outside under the stars. They sat side by side on the porch steps, the cool night air wrapping around them like a blanket. "You okay?" she asked. Softly, Jack sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I keep thinking about Grace." Emma froze, surprised by the mention of the name. "Who's Grace?" "A woman I loved," Jack explained, his voice barely above a whisper. "She died years ago in a car accident. After that, I shut everyone out. I convinced myself I didn't need anyone, that being alone was safer. Coming here, meeting you, it's made me realize how wrong I was." Emma's heart ached for him, hearing the pain in his voice. "You're not alone anymore, Jack. Not if you don't want to be." He turned to look at her, his dark eyes filled with gratitude and something else, something deeper. "Thank you, Emma, for everything." They sat in silence for a while, the sound of crickets chirping filling the space between them. In that moment, Jack realized he wasn't just fighting for Willow Creek. He was fighting for a second chance, a chance to heal, to connect, to live fully again. And for the first time in years, he allowed himself to believe it might be possible. The days that followed were a whirlwind of activity for Jack and Emma. The developers returned to Willow Creek with renewed determination, armed with revised proposals and promises of compromise. They held more meetings, made presentations, and even offered incentives to sway public opinion. But Jack stood firm, refusing to budge on his stance. He believed in preserving the soul of the town, even if it meant going against powerful forces that Emma watched as Jack poured every ounce of energy into protecting Willow Creek. She admired his resolve, but could see the toll it was taking on him. Dark circles formed under his eyes, and his shoulders seemed perpetually weighed down by invisible burdens. Still, he pressed on, driven by a sense of purpose she hadn't seen in him before. One evening, after yet another heated meeting at the community center, Emma cornered Jack outside. "You're running yourself ragged," she said bluntly, crossing her arms. "When was the last time you slept properly?" Jack chuckled dryly, leaning against the railing of the steps. "Sleep's overrated." "Don't give me that." Emma shot back, stepping closer. "You can't keep doing this to yourself. You'll burn out before anything gets resolved." "I'm fine," Jack insisted, though his tired eyes betrayed him. "Besides, I don't have a choice. If I stop, now everything falls apart." Emma sighed, shaking her head. "That's not true. You've already done so much. People respect you. They trust you. But they also care about you, Jack. Not just what you're doing for the town." Her words struck a nerve, forcing Jack to pause. For weeks, he'd been consumed by the fight so focused on protecting Willow Creek that he hadn't stopped to consider his own well-being. "It's not just about the town anymore, is it?" he murmured, almost to himself. "What do you mean?" Emma asked softly. "I mean, this isn't just about stopping the developers or saving the land. It's about proving something to myself, maybe even to Grace." His voice cracked slightly on her name, and he looked away, embarrassed by the raw emotion spilling out. Emma placed a gentle hand on his arm. "You don't have to prove anything to anyone, Jack, least of all someone who's gone." He turned back to her, his expression conflicted. "But what if I fail? What if I let everyone down?" "You won't," Emma said firmly. "And even if things don't go perfectly, you'll still be here with us. That matters more than any outcome." Her words lingered in the air, sinking deep into Jack's heart. For years, he'd carried the weight of his grief, letting it define him. But now, standing beside Emma, surrounded by the warmth and support of the people of Willow Creek, he began to see a different path, one where he didn't have to shoulder everything alone. Later that week, Jack decided to visit the old cemetery on the outskirts of town. It was a place he'd avoided since arriving in Willow Creek, too afraid of the memories it might stir. But now, he felt drawn to it, like it was time to confront the past once and for all. The graveyard was quiet, bathed in the soft glow of twilight. Rows of weathered headstones stretched across the hillside, each one telling its own story. Jack wandered among them until he found what he was looking for, a simple marker bearing the name Grace Harper. Kneeling before it, he traced his fingers over the engraved letters, feeling a lump rise in his throat. "I'm sorry," he whispered, his voice trembling. "I should have come sooner. I thought staying away would make it easier, but it only made me lonelier. You deserve better than that from me, from life." Tears streamed down his face as years of bottled-up pain finally surfaced. He cried for Grace, for the life they might have had together, and for the years he'd wasted shutting others out. But most of all, he cried for himself, for the man he used to be, and the man he wanted to become. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the graves, Jack felt a strange sense of peace wash over him. He realized he couldn't change the past, but he could choose how to move forward. And for the first time in years, he allowed himself to hope for healing, for connection, for love. When Jack returned to town the next morning, he seemed different. There was a lightness to his step, a clarity in his eyes that hadn't been there before. Emma noticed it immediately when he walked into the diner. "Morning," she greeted him with a smile. "You look lighter." Jack chuckled, sliding into his usual booth. "I feel lighter, like I've been carrying this huge weight around for years, and now it's finally starting to lift." Emma joined him, curiosity lighting up her face. "What happened?" "I went to see Grace," he admitted, his tone soft but steady. "I told her everything, the guilt, the regrets, the fear. And somehow, saying it out loud made it real. I realized I can't keep living in the past. Not if I want to build a future." Emma reached across the table, placing her hand over his. "That's amazing, Jack. I'm proud of you." "Thanks," he said, squeezing her hand gently. "But I couldn't have done it without you. You've been my anchor through all of this." Her cheeks flushed pink, but she didn't pull away. Instead, she smiled warmly. "Well, someone has to keep you grounded." They shared a moment of quiet understanding, their bond stronger than ever. In that instant, Jack knew what he had to. Do not just for Willow Creek, but for himself and Emma. Over the next few days, Jack finalized his plan to protect the town. He worked tirelessly, drafting agreements and negotiating terms with the developers. Rather than selling the land outright, he proposed creating a conservation trust. The trust would preserve the natural beauty of Willow Creek while allowing for limited, sustainable development. It was a compromise, but one that honored both the needs of the community and the environment. When the proposal was presented at a final town meeting, the response was overwhelmingly positive. Residents cheered, clapping Jack on the back and thanking him for his dedication. Even the developers, though initially resistant, agreed to the terms, recognizing the value of sustainability in today's world. As the meeting concluded, Emma pulled Jack aside, her eyes shining with pride. "You did it," she said, hugging him tightly. "You saved Willow Creek." "We did it," Jack corrected, holding her close. "This wouldn't have been possible without you." For a moment, they simply stood there, wrapped in each other's arms, letting the reality of what they'd accomplished sink in. Then, pulling back slightly, Jack looked into Emma's eyes, his expression serious yet tender. "There's something else I need to say." Emma tilted her head, confused. "What is it?" "I've spent years running from my past, from relationships, from love itself. But being here, with you, it's made me realize how empty that life was. I don't want to run anymore, Emma. I want to stay with you." Her breath caught in her throat, surprise and joy mingling in her chest. "Are you sure?" she asked softly. "More sure than I've ever been about anything," Jack replied, his voice filled with conviction. "Willow Creek isn't just a place to me anymore. It's home. And you're the reason I want to stay." Tears welled up in Emma's eyes as she smiled, nodding slowly. "Then welcome home, Jack Harper." In the weeks that followed, Jack threw himself into building a new life in Willow Creek. He helped establish the Conservation Trust, ensuring the land would remain protected for generations to come. He also started working alongside local farmers and business owners, learning the ins and outs of the community he now called his own. As for Emma, she continued running the diner, though she no longer did it alone. Jack became a permanent fixture, there, helping out whenever he could and keeping her company during long hours. Together, they dreamed of expanding the diner, or maybe even opening that bakery Emma had always talked about. Through it all, Jack found something he hadn't expected: peace. For the first time in years, he felt rooted, not bound by fear or regret, but anchored by love and purpose. And as he stood beside Emma on the porch of her house one evening, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and pink, he knew he'd finally come home, not just to Willow Creek, but to himself. The months that followed brought a sense of renewal to Willow Creek. The conservation trust Jack had established quickly became a cornerstone of the town's identity. Fields once threatened by bulldozers were now protected, their golden grasses swaying gently in the breeze. Trails were marked for hiking and horseback riding, drawing visitors who wanted to experience the unspoiled beauty of the land. Local farmers thrived under sustainable practices, selling fresh produce at the weekly market. Even the diner saw an uptick in customers as tourists stopped by for coffee and pie after exploring the countryside. Jack embraced his role in the community with a humility that surprised even himself. He wasn't just the wealthy landowner anymore. He was a neighbor, a friend, and someone who genuinely cared about the people around him. He spent his days working alongside locals, fixing fences, planting trees, or simply chatting over coffee. At night, he often found himself on Emma's porch, watching the stars twinkle above the prairie while they talked about everything and nothing. Emma, too, felt a shift in her life. For years, she'd poured all her energy into keeping the diner afloat, rarely allowing herself time to dream beyond survival. But with Jack by her side, she began imagining new possibilities. Together, they started planning the bakery. She'd always dreamed of a cozy little shop where she could bake pies, cakes, and bread from scratch. It would be a place not just for food, but for gathering, laughter, and connection. "Are you sure you're ready for this?" Jack teased one evening as they sat together sketching designs for the bakery. "Running two businesses is a lot of work." Emma rolled her eyes, though a smile tugged at her lips. "I've been running this diner practically single-handedly for years. A bakery won't scare me off." "Fair point," Jack admitted, raising his hands in mock surrender. "Besides, I'll help however I can. You won't have to do it alone." Her heart warmed at his words. Over the past few months, Jack had proven himself to be more than just supportive. He was reliable, kind, and endlessly patient. She couldn't imagine tackling this new adventure without him. As spring turned to summer, the town buzzed with activity. The Conservation Trust hosted its first annual festival, celebrating the natural beauty of Willow Creek. Families set up tents near the trails. Kids ran wild through fields of wildflowers, and musicians played lively tunes under the shade of ancient oak trees. Jack stood back, watching the festivities unfold with a quiet pride. This was what he'd fought for, not just preserving the land, but fostering a sense of belonging among the people who called it home. Emma joined him, handing him a plate piled high with barbecue ribs and cornbread. "Here," she said, nudging him playfully. "You've earned this." Jack grinned, accepting the food gratefully. "Thanks. Though I think most of the credit goes to everyone else. They're the ones making this place special." "Don't sell yourself short," Emma replied, leaning against him. "You gave us a reason to come together. That's no small thing." He wrapped an arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. "Maybe, but none of it would mean anything without you here to share it with me." Their bond had deepened over the months, growing stronger with each passing day. What had started as friendship had blossomed into something more profound, a partnership built on trust, respect, and love. Neither of them had planned for it, but both were grateful it had happened. By fall, construction on the bakery began. The building chosen for the project was an old barn on the edge of town, weathered but sturdy. Jack and Emma worked tirelessly to renovate it, stripping away layers of peeling paint and replacing rotted beams. Neighbors pitched in whenever they could, offering tools, advice, or simply encouragement. Slowly but surely, the barn transformed into a charming little bakery, complete with large windows, wooden floors, and shelves stocked with jars of homemade jams and preserves. On opening day, the entire town showed up to celebrate. The lines stretched down the street, filled with eager customers clutching reusable bags and baskets. Inside, the air smelled of cinnamon, vanilla, and freshly baked bread. Emma moved behind the counter like a whirlwind, serving slices of apple, pie, and warm loaves of sourdough. Jack stayed busy refilling coffee pots and chatting with customers, his easygoing nature putting everyone at ease. "This is incredible," Emma said later that evening, collapsing onto a chair in exhaustion. "I never thought we'd pull it off." "We did," Jack corrected, sitting beside her, "and it's only the beginning." She smiled, reaching for his hand. "You know, when you first rode into town, I never imagined any of this. I thought you were just another cowboy passing through. And now?" Jack asked, raising an eyebrow. "Now?" Emma paused, her gaze softening. "Now I can't picture my life without you." Jack squeezed her hand, his heart swelling with gratitude. "Same here. You've given me a reason to stay to really live again." Winter arrived sooner than expected, blanketing Willow Creek in a layer of snow. The town slowed down, settling into its usual quiet rhythm. Jack and Emma took advantage of the downtime, spending long evenings together by the fire. Sometimes they read books, other times they talked late into the night, sharing stories and dreams. Other nights they simply sat in comfortable silence, content to be in each other's presence. One chilly afternoon, Jack surprised Emma with a trip to the cemetery. It was the first time she'd visited since meeting him, and she understood why he'd brought her there. Together, they stood before Grace's grave, the snow crunching softly beneath their boots. "Thank you," Jack said quietly, his breath visible in the cold air, "for helping me let go of the past and embrace the future." Emma slipped her hand into his, squeezing it gently. "You did the hard part. I just gave you a nudge." He chuckled, turning to look at her. "A pretty big nudge, if you ask me." They shared a laugh, the sound echoing softly in the stillness. For a moment, they simply stood there, honoring the memory of those who came before while cherishing the life they were building together. As the years passed, Willow Creek continued to thrive. The Conservation Trust flourished, protecting the land for generations to come. The bakery became a beloved fixture in the community, known for its warm atmosphere and delicious treats. And Jack and Emma? They built a life rooted in love, laughter, and shared purpose. On clear nights, they often walked together along the trails Jack helped preserve, their footsteps muffled by fallen leaves or fresh snow. Hand in hand, they gazed at the stars, marveling at how far they'd come from strangers to partners in every sense of the word. "You know," Emma said one evening, breaking the peaceful silence, "when I look at the sky, it feels endless, like anything is possible." Jack smiled, pulling her closer. "It does, and so are we." In that moment, standing beneath the vast expanse of twinkling lights, they knew they'd found something rare and precious, a second chance at happiness, built not on wealth or power, but on simple joys and unwavering love. And in the quiet town of Willow Creek, surrounded by rolling hills and open skies, they discovered that home wasn't just a place, it was the people you chose to share it with.